How do you think the COVID pandemic, as well as the conflict in Ukraine, have affected, or rather impacted, progress on trying to implement these goals? And of course, there are also other things that the conflict has caused. Among them, it's affected energy supplies and prices. It's exacerbated inflation as well. And we're also seeing something of a food shortage right now.
You know, look, the way I observe what's happening in context to the SDGs is really simply that they are truly goals, right? And as the comments that you shared earlier with your conversation with Akeem Steiner, is that maybe the timeline is not realistic, but the goals are still very much important. And I think what we're realizing is there are overlays that occur in context to these goals that affect our ability to achieve them. Certainly the Ukraine-Russia crisis has impacted certainly a number of those goals. When we think about achieving zero poverty, or we think about the energy, achieving clean energy, those are goals that are suffering a setback because of the implication of that crisis on food security and energy to other regions around the world. Similarly, when we think about COVID, ironically, the beginning of the pandemic, when the world halted momentarily, we saw very modest positive outcomes in terms of things like carbon emission and environmental benefits. But as the world surged back in the last year or so, we're seeing impacts that have regressed us in a different direction when we think about supply chain issues and we think about how that affects productivity and areas of sustainability for cities. So certainly the goals themselves remain important, but I think it makes us realize that certain overlays, certainly the crisis in Ukraine, certainly the impact of the pandemic, and I would also argue the climate crisis that we're moving in. We're seeing very accelerated impacts of climate change affecting human life in a number of ways, in a number of sectors. So recognizing that these are goals, they're still important, but also understanding that we may not be able to achieve them in the original timeline in an absolute sense, but addressing them and trying to achieve them incrementally can help address some of these other overlays that we're experiencing at the moment.